how I plan to double my investment portfolio within the next 12 months. In this video, I wanted to sort you through the plan I've got in place, my current investment portfolio and what this looks like, and how you can follow along too. So if you'd have watched my first video, you'll have known that my portfolio right now is currently made up of over £40,000. This is in a mix of stocks and shares, mostly the S&P 500 with a few individual stocks in there, and there's a few odd cryptocurrency investments and things, but I'm not really counting that in terms of my overall portfolio at the moment. Now, what I plan to do this year is invest most of that money, if not all of that money, into property. I've always wanted to get into property. This is something I've been lusting after for 5-6 years or so now. The reason behind this is because a lot of what you can do in property is built up on leverage. Now, the good thing about leverage is the fact that you can use someone else's money to in turn make you more money. Now, the way that I plan to use leverage in the property industry is through buying properties and renting those properties out. Now, the good thing about what you can do with leverage, again, is take out multiple mortgages for the cost of obviously not having to buy the entire amount of the house. You'd only have to pay 25% deposit. So in turn, if you buy a £100,000 house, you'll only have to put down £25,000. And if you've got a net rental income of around £300 to £350 per month, you know that at the end of the year, you're going to have closer to £4,000 in profit, which off of £25,000 will return you roughly 16%. Once the property has been paid for, you've got the mortgage on the property, you're not only getting rental income, you're also getting a capital appreciation on the property as well. So if over the next 2-3 years that property increases by 10%, you've technically gained an extra £10,000 on that property, which you can later refinance and pull that money out and essentially have an extra £10,000 to go to put towards another property. So if you think about it that way, you've got £10,000, let's say that's 2 years, that property's increased 10%, you've got an extra £5,000 a year plus an extra £4,000 in rental income, totaling about £9,000 per year profit off of owning that one property. Now, those numbers are obviously good numbers. Sometimes the property could be less in terms of appreciation, less in terms of rental income as well. But let's say on average, you'd be looking around that kind of ballpark. So that's kind of one of the main reasons why I want to start investing into property. So how will I use this to actually double my investment portfolio in 12 months? Now, the way that I plan to do this is once again buying multiple properties this year. The idea is to finish this year with 3 properties, overall amassing around about £1,000 per month in rental income profit. And at the same time, in the next couple of years, hopefully both or all properties have increased by about 10%. Therefore, adding, hopefully, at that point, another £30,000 into the portfolio that I've got. Now, the plans to double it this year would mean starting off with £45,000, which I've got now, and hoping to have about £90,000 by the end of the year. There's a strategy called buy, refurbish, refinance in property, and that essentially means buying a property, doing that property up, adding some value to the property, and then refinancing the property and pulling most, if not all sometimes, of your initial investment out of it. Now, this is the best and probably the quickest way to scale in property. And for me, that's kind of why this method is something that I most definitely will be exploring this year. Now, I would say for a lot of people, it's not something you can just dive into straight away. There will be a learning curve. For myself, it will also be a learning curve. But it's something that I've always wanted to kind of get involved with and at least test the waters if this is something that I can definitely do. So that's my plan for this year of how I will be doubling my investment portfolio. So that would mean initially for the first house, putting down £25,000 or thereabouts. For the next house, I'll be looking at doing the buy, refurbish, refinance model, hopefully buying something and having, let's say, around about £10,000 left into that property and creating the other piece of equity. So if that's another £100,000 house, it'd only be having £10,000 of my money into it and creating £15,000 of equity in that house straight away. If that could be repeated another 3 times, I've essentially added £45,000 of equity to the investment portfolio, therefore amassing the doubling of investment portfolio that I was after for this year. Alongside this, I will still be putting money away from my day job. I'm aiming to be putting around about £1,500 per month away at the moment. And hopefully, if my earnings keep increasing, which would be nice, then I plan to keep putting more, and if not the same amount away each month, depending on obviously how the whole entire year goes. But alongside the rental income that I should be getting, I'll be kind of adding this into the portfolio as well. The plan is at the moment just to kind of keep amassing as many properties as humanly possible for 2024. So that's my initial plan at the moment. Now, the great thing about property is that it's understood, or at least a lot of people are aware of property, which is always good because, as the saying goes, it's safe as houses, means that people would be quite willing to part with money to help you on your journey. So another way of stretching your money in property is through raising finance. Now, this can be in the form of asking lenders or investors to loan you money with the intent of giving them their money back plus some. So a lot of people at the moment that I'm seeing in this space are borrowing funds from investors and giving them around about 10% return on their money. So this would be loaning £10,000 and getting £11,000 back, and using that £10,000 towards a refurbishment on a property that you may not have, but you may have the deposit money. Or it might be going towards a deposit and you borrow £50,000 towards a deposit and the entire refurb of a project. And then once that project's completed, hopefully give that investor all their money back from the extra capital that you've acquired on the property. If not, then potentially some money that you've been able to stash away from the day job, or that you've already got in the investment portfolio. Now, the plan here is really just to kind of grow that money as quickly as possible, and that means you can potentially take on multiple projects at once rather than just doing one at a time, which obviously if I'm trying to get this all fit in within the 2024 year, which is already about a quarter of the way through, I probably may need to look at taking on multiple projects at once. Now, for a lot of people, the idea of having multiple properties means only one thing: multiple mortgages. The good thing about mortgages compared to other forms of debt are mortgages are usually one of the cheapest forms of debt that you can get. A lot of the time, maybe not at the moment, you can get mortgages at around 3 to 4%. At the moment, potentially maybe 5 to 6%, but around about the 4 to 5% at the moment is kind of what we're seeing in the market. Now, with mortgages being one of the best forms of debt, it means that you can borrow that money essentially for as lower interest rate as you're probably ever going to get. A lot of the time, if you went and got a bank loan, you might be looking at 10, 11, 12%. I've seen car finance APRs at around 14 to 15, 16%. Therefore, a 3 to 4% mortgage doesn't seem anywhere near as bad in terms of borrowing that money. Now, the good thing about a mortgage, if you're using it for a buy-to-let or an investment purpose, is that once you've got this 3 to 4% term on the mortgage, if you can make your money work harder than 3 to 4%, which a lot of the time you can, you'll actually see better return on that money than you would elsewhere. So the idea then is that if you can acquire a mortgage at 3 to 4% and rent out this property, getting around 10 to 15% return on your investment, meaning that you're actually clearing more money by doing this, by having this, than if you weren't going to have it. And that property will also appreciate. Therefore, you can understand how this leverage can be classed as good debt. Forms of bad debt would be things like paying for a car monthly, paying for a holiday monthly, paying for clothes monthly, on like a Klarna or anything that's got an APR associated to it, that once you've bought that item, it's probably going to depreciate and it's definitely not going to be making you any more money. So what we'd like to try and do is use that leverage to essentially make more money, therefore classing it as good debt. Now, you do obviously need to be careful not to over leverage in property. I've heard of a lot of people that have done this, where they bought too many properties and all of a sudden they can't get tenanted, or something goes wrong with the property and all of a sudden they can't afford the payments, and therefore have got themselves in a bit of a mess. So the idea for me at the moment is to try and acquire 3 this year. Fingers crossed if I can start to kind of double that in 2025 and see where I start to get, with the idea of hopefully having around about 15 to 20 properties by the age of 30, then I think I'll be in a very good place at that point, purely from rental income and appreciation in the properties, to have an extra additional income to, have a little bit more freedom over what I want to do in life. So here's how you can follow along with my plan as well. So I'm aiming to be updating a video once I've completed on the first property. This property will be classed as a turnkey buy-to-let, so this has got somebody already renting it out at the moment. There's nothing that needs to be done to this property, and it's currently being bought for £87,000. It's then going to be rented out at £625, potentially to £650 per month, and then that hopefully will net me around about £300 per month on that property. And then property number 2 once I've acquired that one, I will be looking to get one that will need some work doing to it, and I'll hopefully bring you along for the journey of that and document the full refurb, what that looks like in terms of total costs, and then what total profits and expected return on investment would be on that property as well. And then a final thought, if you are an investor, property investor, or somebody that is looking to invest their money outside of it just being sat into a bank, it'd be great to have a discussion with you. I always love to increase my knowledge on this space. I know there's a lot of people that are kind of selling courses and things all over Instagram, but it'd be great to kind of hear from people that are actually going out and doing that at the moment and are more than willing to hopefully share a little bit of knowledge with somebody that's kind of getting started in that space. So if that is something you'd be willing to do, let me know.